One of the things that we feel compelled to mention now and then is precisely that. If one looks at, say, the UN Agency for Children's Rights, the United Nations Children's Fund, if many of you know the logo, there's a mother and a child. Many of our child development programs, much of our children's services have a notion that mothers are the innate caregivers. So I find myself having to repeat this a lot, that actually fathers can do this stuff. Everywhere we have the data, whether we say there's no biologically based difference in terms of being able to care, and I think that's a really important issue to start early on, that boys and girls can learn this and do it. There seem to be no biologically based differences between the sexes in terms of the responsiveness to a child's needs. There's even some of the interesting hormonal studies that are coming out showing that men in close contact with small children have similar hormonal changes that women do in breastfeeding. Different intensity, different mix, but showing that we are as biologically wired for care as men as women are. Again, differences that come along with breastfeeding and the hormonal effects of that. But the rest suggests that we are actually capable of it, but that we as a species don't do all that much to encourage our males of the species to do this well. So that's where we kind of come in affirming, you can do this, it's partly in your genes, the rest is about the world around you, and that's why we're trying to figure out how we can convince you to do it. These are the gaps, and this is where we often start from a gender equality perspective of who's doing the unpaid care work. I mentioned the number before of women globally doing 2 to 10 times the amount of daily unpaid work at home. That's either the domestic stuff or that's the care for children. These are the daily gaps running from about 1.6 to 4.5 hours of the daily difference in time of unpaid care. Even as women enter the workforce, we've seen that men have not been rushing in to do the daily cleaning, nor to do the care for children. There are shifts going on, and this is not to make us as men to feel horribly guilty, just to feel like kind of where we are and why it is that some women are not quite convinced that we as men can do the work and why there's still a big way to go here in terms of the gaps. With some of this data, we've done a Global South survey, and this is the one that Mary mentioned before. It's called the International Men and Gender Equality Survey. We've now carried it out in 16 countries. The orange and the purple are countries where it's been completed. The blue are countries that are on the way. It's about a 25-page questionnaire, or if you do the paper version or if you do the handheld version, it's about 250 items. Kind of everything you can ask a man about his views around gender equality, his experiences of violence growing up, his use of them, unemployment, employment, his marital status or relationship status, sexual behavior, health-seeking behavior, mental health issues, suicide ideation, gun ownership. It's about as long as you can get a man to sit still before he starts throwing things at you. So it's about a 45-minute to an hour-long questionnaire. We've done this now about 35,000 surveys. We also carry it out with women because we think you need to hear what women say about men. And then we have men, a picture of men's reports of behaviors, attitudes, life conditions. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of the data, but it's kind of one of the biggest, most complex data sets we have around men and where they are in terms of gender equality, but other life issues. So first, I'll give you a few notions of which men are doing more of the caregiving. And I didn't give you for those who like the adjusted odds ratios, I can send you those later, but just to give you a sense of some of the factors that show up. One, the issue of guys who believe that men and women are pretty equal and that we should have equal attributes and equal rights tend to do more of the caregiving. Those who saw it growing up, either they were taught to do it, they were made to do it, they saw their fathers do it, are far more likely to do it. Those who were not exposed to violence growing up are more likely to be involved in caregiving. So violence had a dampering effect or a counter effect on men participating in care work. It matters men's work conditions, if you're able to work fewer hours, if your spouse works, that's the last one there. Paternity leave we think matters, but most of our sample had very little paternity leave, and it's hard to know whether that's a cause or it's an effect, whether men who are already more engaged are more likely to take leave. But it does give us a sense of the kinds of things that nudge men along to do more of the care work. And I'll just give one comment on the poster over here, because this, we use that expression now of somebody is my rock star, but not really about rock stars. This one is a rock star, and he really is a rock star. He's a drummer or an ex-drummer from one of Brazil's rock bands called the Titãs or the Titans, and he toured for about 20 years. And then he became a father kind of later in life, and came out, there was a newspaper article on him saying, you know, my daughters will only be this young once. I'm giving up that touring 180 days a year. I'm going to be home and be the main caregiver. And so we convinced him to do a public service announcement with us on, and basically the phrase, and he says this in the video as well, he says, "You give me rhythm, you are my father." And his daughters are talking about how important it is to have him there. So we were thrilled to find a rock star who really is of fatherhood, who really is a rock star.